We look at a recap of day one of 2022 training camp for the Baltimore Ravens and much more with a very special guest next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back here, another episode of Locked On Ravens. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, and we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube. Follow us along in audio form as well. But we're here today after the first full practice of Baltimore Ravens training camp, and here with us to break it all down. The takeaways from it is Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. And Spencer, we finally made it. We finally can talk about football, bubbles, and training camp battles, and everything under the sun. How you doing?
Doing quite well. Football's in the air. It's time. The season's officially upon us. The festivities have started. It's training camp. It's the time to get ready, time to start seeing who can start to emerge into from the third team to the second team, from the second team to the first team, and get into some preseason action. So very exciting time. The humidity is in full force, and we're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, and very training camp focused show today. And I do want to talk, Spencer, in the first segment, just about a couple of moves the Ravens made and just maintenance stuff, and also Julio Jones, which we'll get to in a second here. But the Ravens did make a couple moves over the course of these last couple of days here, signing running back Corey Clement. They signed a veteran wide receiver. Well, not necessarily a veteran. He was an undrafted guy in 2021 in Bailey Gaither. Are those guys anything other than camp bodies to you, Spencer? Could they carve out a role on this team? I think Clement is one where it's interesting because of the situation with J.K. Dobbins against Edwards. But how are you feeling about those two?
I've always thought Corey Clement's a nice, end of committee back that can go give you some touches, do some things in the pass game, got a little bit of quickness, a little bit of speed. Not someone that's really going to blow you away, but in this Ravens offense, any running back that can move and scoot a little bit has a chance, especially with Lamar Jackson at the helm. So Clement, I would equate to someone that's probably really going to fight Justice Hill on this roster, and depending on health, one of those guys might have a shot to make it, especially if a Gus Edwards has to start the season on the PUP list, something like that. So Clement, camp body plus. Not sure, exactly how it's all going to pan out. We have a lot of clouds over the running back situation and hoping to get some clarity over the next few weeks here. But ultimately, wouldn't say he, is a crazy long shot, but definitely not close to a lock at all. So he's going to get into that bubble mix and see what he can do and how he can factor over the next couple of weeks. And again, I think Justice Hill is going to be competing against him primarily. They have a similar skill set to a degree in many ways. And then Bailey Gaither, I would love to tell you more about Bailey Gaither. He's a USFL guy, but I've never really cut the tape on him. Wasn't big into the San Jose offense back in 2020. A blind spot for me. So I would think that anyone who is deeper than Rashad Bateman and Tylan Wallace and Devin Duvernay and James Prochet has a little bit of a shot, has a little bit of a chance. There's a lot of openings there. Benjamin Victor, Slade Bolden, all these guys, Devin Williams, all the guys that are big-bodied and all the guys that are little-bodied and everything in between. There's Jalen Moore factoring in as well, too. So we'll see what happens. I don't want to rule anyone out of that competition, especially when I don't have much of a background on Bailey Gaither. I know he stepped away from football, decided to get back after it with the USFL. He was on the Packers at one point and has reloaded. So we'll see if he's able to carve out a little role for himself and get some preseason action and fight. A guy like Jalen Moore, they've kept around on the practice squad, and another guy that could definitely emerge. So there's more bodies, there's more lottery tickets, all of those things in that room.
Yeah, and they've stacked up those lottery tickets, and whether they do end up keeping 5 receivers or 6 receivers, so whether it is 1 or 2 spots behind the big 4 in Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, Tylan Wallace, James Prochet, they definitely have options there, and we'll talk a bit about what veteran options there could be if they go that route in a couple minutes. But Spencer, I do want to gauge your concern level on a couple of things here. There's the obvious holdout of David Ojabo, the last rookie to not have a rookie deal. And there's apparently the holdup on the 3rd-year guarantee number, which when you look at actually the picks before and after him, there's a pretty big gap, like right before and right after. So that's one thing. And the other thing is Ben Cleveland on the NFI list feels like a conditioning test thing, where if it is a failed conditioning test, he can take it again is every day, and then when he passes it, he comes off of that list. But what's your concern level, I guess, on a scale of 1 to 10 with Ojabo in Cleveland?
I'd say 0. 1, Ojabo is not going to practice anyway, so non-story. What's going under the radar, I think, to most people that are questioning the situation or reading into it a bit much, is that rookies in the second round, like you said, there is a drop-off at a certain point in terms of guaranteed money in year 3. Jaquan Brisker also was getting into a holdout situation with the Bears, and picks kind of like 37 through Ojabo now. We're really trying to slot different amounts of money, and we're some curious situations when you go look at it from a point of view of each of them. I had it right in front of me. Pardon me, I can't find it now. I had it in my Slack channel for Baltimore Beatdown. But anyway, there, for instance, like I think Josh Paschal got a few $100,000 guaranteed, like $250,000 guaranteed in year 3, whereas another pick had like $1 million guaranteed. So it's a good bit of money for these second round guys. So at the end of the day, there's more going on in the landscape of the slotting and the guaranteed money and bonus structures in the second round than there is going on with David Ojabo necessarily, and he's just another piece of that puzzle. So they'll figure it out. Whatever they're fighting on is relatively trivial to the entire entity of the Ravens salary cap structure, but it could be a little bit more of an agent battle where they're trying to, get these guys that increased amount, that increased year 3 guarantee money, and are going to continue piling that on year after year and being an advocate for their clients, something along the lines. I mean, they get paid too from it. So I imagine that it's a little bit more in that ballpark than it is necessarily in a David Ojabo versus the Ravens ballpark or anything like that. And like I said, he's not going to be practicing anyway, so it doesn't really matter if he's not signed by this point, all of those things. It's a unique case. No one's expecting him to be close to the field. He's, able to go participate in rehab, all those things, and that's about it. So a real non sequitur, in my opinion, in terms of, a big story.
Yeah, and I feel like in these situations, I mean, the drop-off was very substantial between even pick 44 and pick 46, Ojabo obviously being 45. So whether that is $100,000 or $200,000 or whatever the agent is trying to get Ojabo, whatever Ojabo wants, or whatever the Ravens don't want to pay at that point, it does feel like something will get worked out at some point. But you're right. He's not a player that's going to be on the field practicing right now, so it's not the end of the world. Like, obviously, it'd be great if he was in the building with the team, in the meetings and everything, but I'm not necessarily putting a ton of stock on that right now. I think something will end up getting worked out. But Spencer, big news from the NFL perspective is Julio Jones signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, he was somebody who I would have actually liked to see on the Ravens, but 1 year, $6 million for Julio Jones. Is that a number, Spencer, that you're willing to pay a veteran wide receiver if you're the Ravens, especially because if someone goes down, let's say James Prochet misses 6 weeks or something, the Ravens are getting pretty thin there. So do you still feel like a veteran wide receiver could be an option for them? Do you feel like at this point they're just going to roll with the young guys, and then maybe if someone gets hurt, then you're looking at maybe a midseason addition there?
So $6 million for Julio Jones. I mean, really his entire career, he's been a top 5 receiver except for last year. I think he played 11 games the year prior, so people are going to go read into that, but we don't have to talk about him anymore. As in terms of the remaining pool, Will Fuller's always drawn my eye, and it's it's a discount bin. So these guys are banged up. Odell Beckham probably can't play until if he has the best recovery humanly possible, despite not being a spring chicken necessarily anymore. Within 9 months of his injury, he's back maybe early December, and on a new team, having his first reps live in December. So that's coming with an asterisk. Do you want to pay $6 million for that? Little trepidation. Will Fuller, same situation. Someone who's often injured, coming off a suspension, all those things. To me, he's the one that I would be willing to pay that to if I had to. And I would rather pay him that than not pay him that and not have any other addition to the receiver room. Or there's door number 3, which is to hold on to that money and wait and see if you can't find a more viable option, a Slayton or whatever it may be, a little bit later in the year towards the trade deadline. And at that point, maybe you're saving some money. Maybe you're parting with a little bit of draft capital that you have, very light draft capital, as well as not paying as much if you're acquiring someone that's on a rookie deal. So Those are all kind of the factors that play into it. I am of the preference of waiting. It was similar last year. The Ravens had the opportunity to maybe try and go claim Odell Beckham. I got into it on Twitter a little bit saying, I don't think the difference between them accomplishing their goals or not was signing Odell Beckham when they're hurting at the cornerback position, for instance, so much. So I always prefer to wait, save the money, and see what you can do towards the deadline, although maybe you're not able to fire on all cylinders. But that's why, the Emmanuel Sanders trade for the 49ers worked out as a perfect example a couple of years ago. And he was a big factor for them and provided that missing spark. So that's kind of the ideal situation, is that it's a player that is healthy, that you do know more about, that you can acquire, part with some late, super late capital, a 2024 late pick, whatever it is, and go in that direction. And to add on to the past point we were just talking about in terms of the third-year guarantees, I finally found it. So, for instance, Arnold Ebiketie, who was the 38th pick, has $1.36 million in third-year guarantees, which would be the 2024-2025 season. Ojabo yet to be signed. Then 46, Josh Paschal, has only $275,000 in third-year guarantees. The pick after him, Fedarian Mathis, only $110,000. So if you're talking about $100,000 versus $200,000, that's 50% of your third-year guarantees, a little bit more substantial. The drop-off from Mechie, who was the 44th, to Paschal, who was the 46th, with Ojabo in between, is $575,000. So I imagine Ojabo's fighting for every dime that he can get in that sense. And I just wanted to wrap that point up. But in the end, I hope the Ravens hold on to their money. I would be fine with Will Fuller, someone that's always excited me, can take the top off. And, when he's able and his hamstrings are in decent health, he's able to take the top off, be an effective player. And I think we are all a little surprised that maybe the Browns haven't gone after him after bringing in Watson, but maybe that has more to do with some off the field things. So at the end of the day, it's kind of the going rate, and you're probably not going to get that amount of pay or that amount of play for the pay, but it's better than nothing. So if one of these other receivers is to go down, it's trouble. If Rashad Bateman can't play 8 games this year, it's trouble. Even if Duvernay can't play 8 games this year, it's trouble for that room. And I would be remiss to think the Ravens don't make some kind of move, but they're not the team that wants to go pay a receiver $25 million a year in an offense where you're not going to get $25 million a play, maybe not even $15 million a play from most receivers, if not all. So it's a weird situation that we become super polarized by, as the Ravens receiver woes going back to Anquan Bolden and Torrey Smith departing, and it's where we are.
Yeah, and I feel like, Spencer, you make good points there, because Will Fuller, to me, is the only guy that moves the needle even a little bit for them, for the guys who are still in the market. I'm not just signing someone to sign someone if I'm the Ravens, because you still have talent there. And it becomes a question of, well, if you're signing a D.D. Westbrook or an Allen Hurns or something, I don't think that moves the needle at all for them. I feel like they still have young talent that they need to see what they have in. And maybe when you get to week 4, week 5, week 6, and maybe there is an injury or something doesn't work out, maybe there's a guy who's available then that isn't available right now that we don't know about because of cut down day or something. There's a guy on the trade block where they could go out there and acquire a veteran. I still think a veteran in that room will be worth it for them if they do decide to go that route. But at the same time, I think if they don't add that player, they will be okay. But it is a bit of a risk, because if Rashad Bateman misses time, if James Prochet misses time, you're getting pretty thin there. So I just wonder what they would do in a situation like that. I think they would go out and add somebody. But again, there are other teams who will also be looking for wide receiver help. Maybe Will Fuller signs somewhere else. Then you're looking at T.Y. Hilton, or maybe Odell Beckham is the case there, but then he's not coming back on the field till November, December, January, even February. So a lot to dive into there, but we still have a ton to talk about here on the show. We're going to be diving into day 1 of training camp, recapping that from around the castle. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here on the show. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about Built Bar. And if you haven't tried the Built Bar Puffs yet, you're really missing out on one of the greatest joys that they have to offer. And there's a new flavor, and it is delicious. It is the cookie dough flavor. They've done it again, the cookie dough chunk puffs. They have a light, chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. You can run to Built.com to snag a box for you and your family as well to be the perfect treat. You can even find a good hiding place and just hoard them for yourself because they're that good. And you're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff, whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or you just need to grab a quick bite. Built is the perfect bar, and they taste like a candy bar. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCK15, get 50% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15. We're back here with our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Thursday. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with Taco Thursday guest today, Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. And Spencer, we're talking about footballs in the air and everything of that nature. Baltimore kicks off their training camp yesterday, their first full team practice. We have notes from around the castle. We'll start with Lamar Jackson, who, of course, always has an amazing visor game. I love the Lamar Jackson visor post that the Ravens put out there. It seems like it gets better every year. Like the visor just increases in awesomeness, for lack of a better word there. But you're looking at Jackson, and Jonas and Jess Rebeck and all the people who were there had some stats about Lamar Jackson and what he was able to do in 11-on-11 drills, 7-on-7. So when looking at what he was actually able to do, he threw 5 of 8. He was 5 of 8 of 11-on-11s, and then 3 of 6 and 7-on-7s. Jonas saying there were some drops, some deflections scattered in there as well. We did see the post from the Ravens, that back shoulder throw to Devin Duvernay, which the placement from Lamar Jackson, the concentration from Devin Duvernay, those are the types of things I'm looking forward to, and I'm excited to see from Lamar Jackson. I mean, what do you think about those numbers? And if you saw the throw, what did you think of that throw?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's put the ball in some crazy places, and that doesn't even come close to the precision that combo had against the Vikings last year in the back of the end zone. Lamar put it in within a let's say 1.5 inch radius of the only spot where Devin Duvernay would have been able to reel the ball in. He reaches back across his body, tips the ball to himself, toe taps in the back of the end zone. I don't think that concentration or hands have ever been something Devin Duvernay has lacked, and is one of the players in the NFL that does get highlighted in some articles and fantasy things of players that are going to have a chance to get increased snaps, possibly be fantasy viable, all of those things. So Duvernay, I'm a big fan of the work that he put in with T. Martin and Keith Williams was last year in terms of becoming more sudden, more flexible, being able to drop his hips, get in and out of breaks, be a little bit more of a complete route runner. And I'm excited to see him thrust into the lion's share of probably a lot of flanker Z snaps, a ton of slot snaps, and being a real starter for this team. He is wide receiver too, especially on the outside, and really the only guy that, other than Rashad Bateman, can be a vertical threat over top. And hasn't really had a chance. He's had one catchable target over 20 yards in his career, but he's run over 100 routes that were 20 yards downfield. He's had plenty of one-on-ones. The ball just hasn't gone there for whatever reason. So would love to see those opportunities. At Texas, he was a really proficient deep ball receiver, tracking, concentration, hands, vertical speed, all of those things. And if he's able to decelerate and accelerate a little bit more suddenly and add a little deception to the mix, able to throttle down, throttle up, all of those things, he's just going to become more effective. So I do think Devin Duvernay is a good NFL wide receiver that is talented. The one area that we've really never seen him take off either, despite being probably the player in the receiver room that's had the most opportunities, is making some guys miss after the catch or breaking some tackles. He was prolific at Texas. He's a first-team All-Pro kick returner who has consistently, gotten 35-plus yards, done tons of great things. We need to see that factor in. He's gotten jet sweeps. He's gotten screens. I think he was 19th in the NFL in combined jet sweep touches and screen touches last year. So need to see him do more after the catch. But at the end of the day, awesome throw. Lamar Jackson can put it wherever he wants to. He's only gotten better over time. Anyone who has consistently followed his career knows that and doesn't listen to the noise the same way he doesn't. So that duo has a ton of potential, and Devin Duvernay stepping up would be a godsend for the Ravens, for Lamar Jackson, and for his future bank account. So Devin Duvernay is going to have every opportunity to keep making those types of plays.
Yeah, and can we talk about Lamar Jackson's physical transformation for a second? I mean, the guy looks just beefed up, bulked up. What does that do for his game, Spencer?
Maybe adds a little confidence in some senses, but I really do just anticipate that weight to fall off of him by like November, October. He's beefed up before. We've seen a picture where somebody posts it and puts a filter on it, and it's like, oh wow, Lamar Jackson's out for blood, all of those things. But in the heart of the season, a lankier guy in the end. He is getting older. He's getting some of that man strength. He will fill out naturally as a man, but I think that weight falls off. Anyone who played football for a long time knows whatever you weigh and whatever your muscle mass is in going into camp, by October, November, it's a lot different, and you're just doing everything you can to try to maintain. And as a quarterback, it's a little bit different. So very fun to see. It does add some skeletal muscle, all of those things. He will continue to beef up a little bit, be able to take a little bit more of a beating if necessary, but he never really has. I mean, he got nipped in the ankle but I can count on one, maybe two hands the amount of times where you thought, man, Lamar Jackson just wasn't big enough. Maybe aside from quarterback sneaks, maybe it helps. There we go. Maybe the big takeaway is he added a little bit of strength and he's able to, push the pile as a quarterback sneaker. I would say that's his Achilles heel as a football player and as a quarterback. The one thing I can say with confidence Lamar Jackson does indeed suck at is quarterback sneaks. Not been his forte. Quarterback power, different story. All those different things, different story. But quarterback sneak has not been his forte. And hey, maybe him and Linderbaum can get the quickness going and able to go burrow underneath some defenders and go pick up some easy first downs. But the Ravens ultimately haven't had a ton of trouble in that department, picking up some first downs and short yard situations on the ground. So we'll see. Hopefully he's able to, be bigger, stronger, faster, better. I just think he'll be back down to that 208, 212 range by the time it's October, November.
Yeah, a couple painful memories when it comes to quarterback sneaks over the past couple of years of the Ravens. So hopefully that mass will help him out. But Spencer, we also saw some reports that J.K. Dobbins was trying to get on the field. He came out in uniform and he had conversations with John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta and then left the field. And Jamison Hensley went as far as to say that he was so motivated to get back on the field that it looked like teammates had to calm him down during practice. So again, multiple different accounts of how that went. But then, John Harbaugh after practice saying that J.K. Dobbins has made it very clear that he does want to get back on the field. And we talked a bit about this when we were just talking about his conversation, his polite conversation with Ian Rappaport on Twitter a week ago. But it seems like he's ready. He's chomping at the bit to get back on that football field, Spencer. Do you anticipate him getting full work in training camp in the near future here? Do you think, again, this is a cautious approach by the team? They're going to do whatever they can to make sure he's 100% by the time week one rolls around or whenever he's ready to get back on the field?
Well, simply, it's impossible for him to be 100% going into week one. It would be definitely an outlier. We've seen an Adrian Peterson do it, and J.K. Dobbins has gone through this before. I think the best case scenario is that they hold him back as long as humanly possible. They don't need him to play in preseason games. He doesn't have anything to prove about his ability to be an effective NFL player. And hey, that's at the end of the day, that's the athletic training job, is helping players not hurt themselves, not put themselves in positions where their mind is ahead of their body and all of those. So I think the best case scenario is that we see J.K. Dobbins go get, a week, 2 weeks of full work towards the end of camp, maybe leading up to week one. He's active week one. He gets a few touches. He is able to feel his body out more and more. And every day that he doesn't put strain on his body on a football field, he's going to recover more every single day. And if that's another month where we're able to get to late August and he's just been resting, recovering, letting himself get back into form, working with the trainers, I'm sure he's chomping at the bit, all of those things. He clearly has something to prove, wants something to prove. The Rappaport situation showed that severely. We're getting these reports about him trying to, Jameis Winston at Florida State sneak onto the field, but got to hold back. There's no benefit to getting on the field today, in my opinion, for him, other than proving, I could make this recovery in this amount of time, but that doesn't do any better to get him as healthy as possible in the end. Just from my, Twitter doctor, reading fantasy doctor reports and all of those things. So, from every study I've ever read by people smarter than me, the difference between 9 months and 10 months is even drastic. The difference between 10 months and 11 months. And really, it's 18 months until that entire knee situation can be back to 100%, even though it really is never the same again. So every day that he sits and rests and waits and continues to rehab is more likelihood that he's going to be fine. So, you want to make sure that he's in a good spot. I'm sure he just wants to get on the field, prove something to himself. I think he said between, him and God, that's the only people who know. And that's fantastic, but they just don't need him in practice today. They don't need him in practice tomorrow. It would be really nice to get a week or two before the season. They need him in December. They need him in November. Fresh legs. If you can manage his workload and give him limited touches, you're able to survive with a Mike Davis and a Tyler Beatty and maybe a Clement or a Hill, whatever it is, then fresh legs later in the season and have him not have taken a beating, not have taken a full workload, and then go run when they need him to heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, because as I've been pretty consistent in saying, I would much rather have J.K. Dobbins at 100% or as close to it as you can get in week 6 or week 7 or something, as opposed to like 75% and him not feeling confident in week 1. And so there are going to be, it's different for every player, physical hurdles, mental hurdles. You have to take all these things into account. So look, J.K. Dobbins is super competitive. There are a lot of competitors on the Ravens right now. They're like Lamar Jackson is one of the most competitive people ever. And like we see that every single year. And that rubs off on people. The Ravens know they have something special. They know they want to get back to what they know they can do. And a lot of that has to do with the return of Dobbins, the return of Gus Edwards, the return of Ronnie Stanley and Marcus Peters and all these players who missed a lot of time last year. Dobbins missed out, I think, on what would have been just an incredible season for him in 2021. And, that probably hurts him a lot. Like, it definitely does. So for him to want to get back on the field, it shows that motivation. But I want it to be the right way. And so you're right. I don't think there was any necessarily benefit for him to practice today or tomorrow or whatever. But it depends what the doctors feel. It depends what J.K. Dobbins feels like himself. Because I know, Spencer, we're not doctors. I know we've said that before. But I still think that for the Ravens, getting these guys back to 100% or as close as you can to that is just so important in this stage. We're going to continue talking about day 1 of training camp in the final segment here on Locked On Ravens. Still a ton to talk about here on the show. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and we will be right back. We're back here, our final 7 of Locked On Ravens, wrapping up our recap of day 1 of 2022 training camp for the Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with Spencer Schultz. And Spencer, there were some reports out of training camp about some guys who looked good. I want to talk about 2 of those guys right now on the defensive side of the ball. Odafe Oweh, who was a blur coming off of the edge, according to Jonas. And then you have Kyle Barber talking about Marcus Williams looking good in coverage, matching up with Mark Andrews, and says he's a really smart player overall. So those 2, Spencer, how excited are you to see them on the field? Odafe Oweh here in year 2, and then Marcus Williams in his first year with the team.
Probably 2 of the 3 or maybe even 2 most exciting players for this upcoming season. Odafe Oweh has a chance to solidify himself and move forward and turn into more than just a freak athlete that's able to be a good run defender and create some chaos, and turn into maybe a borderline elite defender or continue that progression. And again, the Ravens couldn't use an impact out of Odafe Oweh enough. The more impact he creates, the better of a football team they are, almost as directly as anyone probably other than Lamar Jackson on this team. The better he is, the better a football team they are immediately. Marcus Williams, of course, he's a smart player. Of course, he's going to add that. They made a long-term investment in him. They made him, I think, the highest paid safety in terms of guarantees in the league right now. So able to make that investment because of where he comes from in that Allen defense down in New Orleans and now into Baltimore, learning a new system is not going to make him lose the ability to read body language, to dissect combinations in coverage and understand where the ball is going, those sorts of things. So very exciting players. And Williams, is someone that they really are looking to be a premier leader on this team. They paid him that way. They paid him, what they paid Marcus Williams essentially, or Marcus Peters essentially, as a safety. So the Ravens have not made an investment of that magnitude at the safety position since Ed Reed. So they doubled down on Kyle Hamilton, who's probably the next most exciting defender that everyone's going to want to see. So very, very exciting players. Oweh, if he's able to just continue adding functional strength and work his pass rushes, if he can use his get off and his speed and also set that up with a long arm bull rush where he's able to use that inside arm to stab the chest plate of offensive tackles. We've seen him do it. He is capable of doing it. He is very strong, but he didn't try to use that as kind of a home base as a pass rush where he can work the inside and outside paths more. And I really think that is the key to him unlocking himself and becoming a potentially elite edge defender. So those 2 guys are who the Ravens are relying on, 2 of the really core players on this team, essentially. And they need them to be over the next, 3, 4, 5 years moving forward. They also need them to do that in 2022. So there aren't many players who have more resting on their shoulders to go prove something in 2022 as a Baltimore Raven than Odafe Oweh and Marcus Williams.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw 2 more guys at you here because Clifton Brown of BaltimoreRavens.com put out his day 1 notes. And he said that both Rashad Bateman and Marlon Humphrey were matched up twice during the late stages of practice. And Marlon Humphrey got the better of Rashad Bateman on those, with both of those passes not being completed. But he did say that Bateman did have a solid day overall. He was running smooth routes and catching the ball cleanly. I mean, how important are those 2 guys? We know how good of players they are. We know Humphrey's one of the best corners in the league. Rashad Bateman, one of the fastest ascending wide receivers. What are you looking for from those guys?
For Bateman, similar to Odafe Oweh, I'm looking for NFL functional strength. What he said in his own words were that speed wasn't an issue. Quickness wasn't an issue. Those things weren't an issue. It was strength. He said, for the first time in my life, a linebacker was pulling me down with one hand. He had that hernia injury and wasn't able to maintain muscle mass. He was working a lot more on just making sure he was the best route runner he could be, all of those kinds of things. And then going up against someone that is as strong and physical as it comes in the NFL as a press man corner in Marlon Humphrey is going to do wonders in that sense for him to figure out ways to maximize his strength or to be untouchable, either or. So we want to see that absolutely out of Bateman and end up seeing him be able to be dominant in a physical sense, be dominant as a route runner, and also take the top off. Things he did at Minnesota, but was never the strongest of players, more of a quick than strong player for sure. As a wide receiver, he's got the frame to go over the middle. He's not afraid to go over the middle, was a really productive slot receiver at Minnesota. We saw him do it last year as well, make tough, concentrated catches. So want to see him get that out of Marlon Humphrey. For Marlon Humphrey, just want to see him continue to grow in any way and continue to have consistency be the name of the game. No one has ever done to Marlon Humphrey what Jamar Chase did to him. And really the play that everyone thinks of is the long touchdown Jamar Chase scored. Jamar Chase certainly beat him, but Marlon Humphrey was kind of funneling him towards the Deshaun Elliott's and Chuck Clark's in the middle of the field there in that given coverage. And, things just got out of hand and he outran everyone to the end zone. He did have good games last year. He did get beat a few times. Him and Deshaun Elliott had some messed up coverages against the Colts, things of that nature. So they're going to be playing in a little bit of a different defense, maybe a lot of different defense with Mike McDonald. A lot more two safety looks is what the rumors are. We'll see how true that is ultimately. Michigan football and Baltimore Ravens football and playing in college and playing in the NFL are very different in terms of hash marks, numbers, all of those things. So you just want to see Marlon be consistent. He's paid a franchise, him and Ronnie Stanley are, aside from any quarterbacks that the Ravens have signed, Flacco and potentially Lamar Jackson, those are the second and third biggest contracts in Ravens history right now. And they need him to play like a $100 million man, and a $100 million man plays with consistency regardless of opponent. So you just want to see Marlon get comfortable. He is, going to be asked to be on the outside more after spending a ton of time in the slot. And hey, if you're on the outside more again throughout training camp, you're not being used in the slot the same way you were the last couple of years, then you're going to get more reps. You're going to get your feel back over there, and kind of bouncing between those was really impressive. And I think that went under the radar. People talked about, he was so great in the slot, but he was also still playing at a really high level on the outside at press man. Was he as elite as he was maybe in 2019? No, but getting kicked back into the slot, getting kicked back outside, and going and not having Marcus Peters on the other side, not having all of that, having more pressure to go guard those ones. It was a lot of pressure to wear many hats, do many things, and he's capable of it. But now maybe we see him just get jettisoned back into being a premier boundary corner and fighting number ones on the outside.
Yeah, and I kind of want to wrap up, Spencer, with a little bit about positional battles as we kind of head into the couple days here of training camp to round out the week, because Clifton Brown did say, for example, that Tyler Beatty showed soft hands over the course of day one, making catches out of the backfield. That's a player I'm super excited about to see him, Mike Davis, and Corey Clement, as we talked about. But what other positional battles are you looking forward to here as training camp continues on?
Definitely looking forward to the entire linebacker room. Diego Fago, Josh Ross, Zacoby McClain. They still have Ataro Alaka. Christian Welch was on the 53. I think they really like Christian Welch. I think Christian Welch played pretty consistently decent when he got onto the defensive football field last year, aside from special teams. So that whole room, Malik Harrison has to be chomping at the bit, has said he feels like he has a second lease on life after, luckily being able to return to playing football after being shot in the leg. An inch or two in any direction could have ended his career, been devastating, or potentially his life, more importantly. So having that second lease, you want to see him make the most out of it in a defense that supposedly is going to simplify things for linebackers. For sure. Of course, you want to see Patrick Queen emerge over all of that. And then other than that, slot corner, we're talking about Marlon Humphrey. Well, you got Armour-Davis Washington, who I think is looked at as a slot corner. And kind of based on the rumblings that I heard last year, it was really Wink who was the one who wasn't a big fan of Armour-Davis Washington's size. And, Chris Horton was the one who, Chris Hewitt was the one who was really pushing to get him on the team. And he ended up letting Hewitt have the call, and Washington, stays around for a while. So him, then of course, Pepe Williams coming in, Brandon Stevens, all of those guys. So defensively, those are what I'm super curious about as well. Isaiah Mack, Broderick Washington, Aaron Crawford up front, all of those guys, Khalil McKenzie, all of those guys fighting for spots. Broderick Washington, I thought played really well after a tough offseason for him last year. Isaiah Mack, they've gotten into games. Khalil McKenzie played really well in limited snaps too. So those guys are fighting. Jalen Armour-Davis, to see how he factors into that defense. But offensively, after Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, who are obviously recovering, it's open season. Anyone that can step up and prove that they can get it right in pass pro, stay on the football field, provide value in the pass game, all of those things. The run game will come easily in Greg Roman's offense with Lamar Jackson at the helm. The run game is going to be there. So other than that, what can Isaiah likely emerge as? Is he going to emerge as someone who now being able to leap ahead of Charlie Kolar for the time being in the offseason? Is he going to be able to be someone who's getting snaps week one on the offense and getting, a target or two week one? The Ravens typically don't go trot out mid-round rookies week one, especially on the offensive side of the football. So is he able to go emerge in that room? The wide receiver room, of course, again, like the running back room, but even more extreme. Tylan Wallace, Devin Duvernay, and James Prochet have all the possibilities in the world to go make a name for themselves, go catch passes this season, all of those things as things stand. And then behind them, Mekhi Polk, Riley Webb, Slade Bolden, Shamar Bridges, Jalen Moore, all of these guys, they have all of these UDFAs. If you were a UDFA wide receiver, why would you not want to go to the Ravens? You have a really good shot to make the team with a solid camp. Probably one of the easiest landing spots to make a 53 for UDFAs in the NFL. And I feel like Slade Bolden signed in Baltimore because of that and does think he has a really good shot. Benjamin Victor there as well. So all of them. And then really the one that I would say I'm most excited for is see what happens at left guard. Tyree Phillips got the nod week one last year. I think he looks really good at guard. I don't think he quite has the feet or the composition to be a tackle. He wasn't supposed to last year and again got thrusted into it because of injuries. When he wasn't supposed to, he was announced as guard, keeps having to play tackle and kind of stunt his development in that sense as a guard. But Ben Cleveland, I feel like he can beat out Ben Cleveland, Tyree Phillips. Ben Powers has some experience, is a nice depth piece, could see him getting dealt, but he could, of course, emerge. So maybe Cleveland ends up being Kevin Zeitler's understudy and they let Tyree Phillips go really hone in on that left guard spot and give him another honest chance. But if Cleveland has a great camp, does well in preseason, then, it's going to be a tough decision. So that one, I think, is really the battle to watch for in terms of having some kind of quality players there that have a chance that, the Ravens did draft relatively high. All three of them, Powers and Phillips and Cleveland, none of them were seventh round picks, UDFAs, sixth round picks, any of that. They're all guys that the Ravens drafted and thought were going to be able to play. And I think all three of them can play to a degree in different hats, essentially, within this offense. So I'm excited to see how that pans out, and I'm really looking forward to seeing which one emerges. The offensive line, the defensive line, is really tough. You can't sack the quarterback in training camp. You can't do any of those things. So whenever we get some preseason, then we'll kind of get a little bit better idea. But preseason, is just exactly that, preseason. It doesn't always tell the whole story of what coaches are thinking, and studying offensive line play in the offseason or in training camp is really tough. We end up hearing about the pass game guys, the receivers, the quarterbacks, the cornerbacks, all of those things much more. But I'm just curious to see who wins, and that's really where my attention will be week one. And then the final guy, just to throw in there, Daniel Faalele. I'm pumped. Him and Jawan James, I'm pumped to see if they're able to, push anything, if there's kind of whispers that those guys are pushing a Morgan Moses or pushing, in a direction, and want to hear that kind of chatter out of them, especially Faalele, who is considered developmental, but for my money is an instant run blocker that is going to be an impact run blocker in the NFL. So I'd love to see those elephant packages, those rhino packages, all that jumbo stuff with 6 linemen, and see what they're able to do. I guarantee we will see him in the offense on the football field if he is healthy this year in some jumbo packages, especially at the goal line, things like that. Hey, maybe even runs one in like he did at Minnesota. So I'm pumped for that, pumped for this offensive line, and can't wait to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, give him a carry. Give him. Let's see him with a carry. I know Ronnie Stanley came on here and said that he's dreamed of a moment like that. So offensive linemen deserve touchdowns too. I would love to see that. But yeah, I'm excited. You mentioned, Cleveland, Powers, and Phillips. Well, if you want to go Cleveland, Phillips, Powers, that's a 3rd round pick, a 3rd round pick, and a 4th round pick. So you're right. They're not late round investments where kind of like, oh, it's a dart throw, but it'll kind of work out. They all have talent, and they showed in college they have talent. But I agree. I went on 105.7 yesterday, and they asked me about left guard, and I said I think Phillips wins the job right now. I just think that's where it is. I think McCary could be in that conversation too. I like him more as the super six sub-offensive line guy, but who knows? If they want to go with a veteran option at guard, they could make that happen. But I think Tyree Phillips, for me, is the leader, in my opinion, for that job. Spencer, I appreciate you hopping on here. Thank you so much for joining me. What do you have going on over these next couple weeks as training camp kicks off and continues?
I'll be out at camp, not as much as in previous years due to the afternoon schedule. I have some other obligations, but I'll be there. I'll be kicking out some content, looking at this Ravens team as we get geared in, and especially once preseason gets here. Going to be cutting up the all-22 articles on BaltimoreBeatdown.com, of course, covering anything and everything that happens. Podcast Beatdown, we're usually recording twice a week. All kinds of good stuff going on over there. So appreciate you guys, and I'll talk to you next Tuesday for Taco Tuesday.
Yeah, we love Taco Tuesday here on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much, Spencer. Be sure to give Spencer a follow on Twitter at Ravens4Dummies. Follow his work everywhere. It'll all be in the description below. But I appreciate you, Spencer. Thank you again. But that's all we have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. We'll make it back here tomorrow. We'll be rounding out the week talking about more trading camps. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you right back here tomorrow.